My claim is that violent video games do not cause aggressive behavior in children, from the original claim that video games do cause an aggressive change in children. My opponent's first reasoning is that it has gotten easier for younger children to purchase violent video games online without passing age requirements. His quote was that 84% of young adults have consoles and over half of them let their younger siblings play. So my counter to this comes from a study released by Oxford Internet Institute last year, which suggests that the frustration of being unable to play a game is more likely to bring out aggressive behavior than the content of the game itself. This comes from BBC. Even though they have access to certain violent video games, the times in which they're allowed by their older siblings to play wouldn't bring about such violent changes in their behavior. Furthermore, so what if kids are getting access to violent video games? If they were denied access to these games in which their peers are having access to, the violent outbursts that would be caused would be way worse as to compare if they were just to have the video game itself. Also, video games are extremely expensive. The new Call of Duty was around $60. I don't know any children who have a credit card in which to purchase it, or $60 in which to purchase it as well. So if they were able to purchase it, it would have to come through some sort of older intermediary, which means that it therefore passed some sort of parental guidance or parental supervision. Their second reasoning is social learning theory. The kids learn violent behavior through positive reinforcement of killing each other in video games. His quote that there was an 8% increase in aggressiveness of answers after playing a violent video game in a short while. I have two quotes to counter this. The first being from Dr. Mark Coulson, an associate professor of psychology at Middlesex University, who fully acknowledges that the exposure of repeated violence may have short-term effects, but the long-term consequences of crime and actual violent behavior, there's just no evidence linking violent behavior in the violent video games. So the original quote finds that 8% were more aggressive after playing video games. However, we're not aware of how the study concludes that they got more aggressive, and it was also only an 8% increase. Furthermore, it doesn't say how, if the children being tested were already prone to aggressive behavior in the first place, and these just brought it out a little bit more. The claim is that violent video game causes aggressive behavior, meaning that it changes the children's behavior in the long term, and here in this quote it's shown the opposite. That it slightly affects them in the short term, but that's just because they're getting used to the violence of the video game itself. But in the long term, the effects peter out. Furthermore, research involving British primary school children found that the length of time young people spend on playing games rather than the content of those games could have an effect on their behavior or school performance, and even if it's slight. The healthiness of the children in the long term in terms of mental health and behavior is actually determined by the time spent playing video games rather than the fact that the video games in which they're wasting their time on are violent. It's a false correlation to conclude that that is the violence of the video games in which causes the behavior to change, when it's reality the time spent playing this video game that causes the change in behavior. The third reason is that video games have gotten better graphically, therefore it somehow makes them more difficult to distinguish between real life and in a video game. It's kind of silly to think that just because of graphics that kids are somehow becoming more violent. Everybody, including children, can tell the difference between what's in real life and what's in a video game. The American Psychological Association concluded that there was no single risk factor to blame for aggression that violent video games did contribute. This is also from the BBC. Furthermore, according to FBI statistics, youth violence has declined in recent years as computer and video game popularity have soared. Therefore, the recent enhancements of video game graphics are not to blame for the aggression. If there was a correlation to the increased aggression in increased video game graphics, it would be the fact that we spend more time on video games that have better graphics, and therefore they're more likely to capture our attention for longer periods of time. And that time is crucial. That is crucial time that video games take away from children to learn like social skills and develop friendships that make them better deal with the stresses of life. Therefore, it is false to conclude that violent video games cause aggressive behavioral changes in children.
I know these are a lot of speeches we're trucking along. Your brain usually gets a little bit more of a break, I'm sure. And Professor Kirkland's going to give y'all chit chat, but we're going to keep trucking right on through.